Hello, everyone. Welcome to Call and Response. My name is Dr. Katie M. Deaver, and I have the pleasure of serving as Assistant Manager here at One License. I've been in my role here for just over 2 years. Before joining the One License team, I served as a Director of Music in a variety of church contexts. So it has been really enjoyable to be able to bring that experience and that background to my role here at One License. Our general manager, Brenna C. Cronin, is also here with us today. I'll let her say hello and introduce herself in just a moment. Brenna's going to be handling the chat for us today, so she'll be dropping some helpful links and keeping track of your questions for us. Brenna, would you like to say hello and officially introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad that you are here today. You are in good hands with Katie. She is an incredible educator. We have an incredibly important value on our team about being both educational and pastoral in our response. So you'll see that as a culture throughout the entire call today. Just about me personally, I'm based in the Chicago area. I have a real passion for worship and administration and hospitality. So it really and truly is my honor to lead the mission for the global church here at One License.
Thanks so much, Brenna. So today we are extremely excited to also welcome Alex Salazar from OCP. I'll let Alex say hello in just a moment as well, but just to share a little background, he is currently a digital product specialist at OCP, and part of that role is focusing on the digital print and OCP content on One License. Additionally, and this is the part that will likely be very interesting for many of you, Alex is the person who reviews and processes the manual submissions that you as license holders submit to OCP's catalogs. So Alex, would you like to go ahead and say hello?
Hello, yes, thanks for having me. As Katie said, my name is Alex Salazar, and I am based, I work out of the Hillsboro, Oregon, though OCP is based in Portland, Oregon. I do work from home like a lot of us do. So I'm in Hillsboro, Oregon, and I've been working for OCP for about 5 years now in the digital product specialist role. And I'm just very excited to be here, and I hope that by the end of this session that you are all a little more comfortable and confident in reporting these more complicated records on One License.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here, Alex. We're excited
Thank
to
you.
Again, welcome everyone, whether you're joining us live today or watching the recording later on. We are just so pleased to be able to have Alex here and to be able to share this time and this information with you. A little background on these calls. So through these monthly call and response sessions, our hope is that you're going to feel better connected to our team as well as to your peers and colleagues. Being a global company, many of our users aren't able to call us on the phone regularly. So during this time together, we will aim to answer as many of your questions as possible, share some new developments and new information with you, and also just continue to find ways to support you and your ministries by making sure that you can easily utilize our platform. A few housekeeping notes as we get started. Naturally, these calls are a bit different each time since the people on the call and the questions that might be asked are always a little different. Again, we will do our very best to get to each and every one of your questions. But if we don't get to your question today, or if something that we talk about during our time together inspires additional questions, please know that you can always email the One License team at info@onelicense.net. And we can certainly reach out and connect with you that way. Additionally, you are welcome to call our team at 1-800-663-1501. If your call isn't answered live, we do ask that you leave a message and let us know a little bit about your question so that we can give you a call back and help connect you to the resources you need. We do want to encourage your participation in the call today, and you're welcome to engage with us in a few different ways. If you're comfortable, you can go ahead and turn on your video if that face-to-face conversation is helpful for you. Since we do have quite a large number of folks with us today, I will ask that you keep yourself muted. That's going to help with our sound quality on the recording. If you have questions at any point in our time together today, please go ahead and put those into the chat. As I mentioned, Brenna's going to be keeping an eye on that chat for us, but you'll also want to keep an eye on it because Brenna's also going to be dropping some helpful links and some other information that will be helpful for you in the future and moving forward. So definitely feel free to submit some questions that way. Additionally, many of you, in fact, almost every single one, I think there were 2 registrants who didn't submit questions when you registered. We saw those questions. We really appreciate having those ahead of time. And Alex and I are going to do our best to make sure we address all of those throughout our call today. Again, feel free to answer or to chat any additional questions that come up as we're talking in that chat space. One last note, should you need to ask an account related question, it is possible that demographic information like the address, phone number, or email addresses associated with your account could be visible through our screen sharing. So do keep that in mind. All right, so Alex, let's go ahead and jump right into that big question that I know a lot of license holders are interested in today, and have you talk with us a little bit about derivative arrangements. So specifically, the big question that we hear a lot is, why is it that when a license holder submits a copyrighted arrangement to a member publisher, that the member publisher will often replace that arrangement with the original copyrighted text and tune?
Yes, those are the types of submissions that I receive daily. And so there's a handful of titles that I see quite often, in particular let's see, an example would be Sebastian Temple's Prayer of St. Francis. There is various arrangements that exist out there. The one that I can think of off the top of my head is there's let me look at the composer. Oh, so Jane Holstein has a choral arrangement that is published on Hope Publishing. And that is an arrangement of a song that's already copyrighted. So Jane Holstein created this arrangement, but it's already based on a melody and text that is already copyrighted by Sebastian Temple. So therefore, when it comes to reporting on one license, you would need to report to the original song setting of what that arrangement is based on. So Jane Holstein wouldn't get the royalties for the reprint reporting license. It would be Sebastian Temple. Another example would be, actually, can I share my screen, Katie, so that I can show them what I'm seeing?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, so just so you can get a visual. So here is, can everybody see that? Oh wait, no, that's not right. 1 second. Let me try this again. Okay, there we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Perfect, yes.
Yeah, okay, so this is from Hope Publishing. This is the cover image of the choral arrangement by Jane Holstein. The title is Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. And in parentheses below, it says Prayer of St. Francis. Words and music are by Sebastian Temple. Choral setting or arranger is Jane Holstein. So something that you would want to look for, keywords are words and music by is a good indicator that will tell you that, okay, this is an already copyrighted piece of music as far as the melody and the text are concerned. And then the setting, Jane Holstein, or sometimes it'll say arranged by, which is a little more obvious, will tell you, that's a good indicator that will tell you like, okay, this is an arrangement of a song that's already copyrighted. Yes, it's Jane Holstein's arrangement, but because it's based off of a copyrighted melody and text, it's the original creator of that content that would get the royalty that you would report to and who would receive the royalties for. Same thing for Dan Schuette's Here I Am Lord is another one that I get every day, literally every day, if not at least one, if not more. So you'll see here I found an arrangement that's listed on Music Notes. So you got the title, Here I Am, Lord. And over on the left, arranged by Jack Schrader. And then over to the right, Words and Music by Dan Schutte. Words and Music by is a good indicator that will tell you, like, he is the originator of this content, of this melody and this text. So again, if you were to go to One License and do the reporting, then you would look up the record, the original song record by Dan Schutte to do reporting.
That's really helpful, Alex. Thank you for that. So I think to sort of to follow up on that, what they really want to be looking at though is that words or music, that original text and tune copyright. So to take that sort of a step further, let's say that it's an arrangement of something public domain like Silent Night. Then since that original text and tune isn't copyrighted, then they would want to report the arrangement, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, so long as the text and tune is public domain, then the arranger would get some royalties for that arrangement. And therefore we would have the record should be available on One License because of that content is public domain.
Perfect. I think that's really helpful. I know this is a confusing one for a lot of folks, so I appreciate you sharing those examples and showing us those publications as well.
And then also just to clarify too, that does include instrumental only arrangements. So piano, organ, even handbells. I know Jane Holstein has got a series of handbell arrangements of OCP copyrighted songs, so that would also apply as well.
Perfect. That's really helpful. Thank you. So you mentioned this briefly, but let's talk a little bit more about manual submissions and that process. So first, just so we're all on the same page with the license holders today, those manual submissions are a way for license holders to ask permission for titles that are not already included in the One License database. So as I mentioned earlier, those submissions go directly to the member publisher that you select when you're filling out that submission and choosing your copyright holder. So for example, if you select OCP or one of their catalogs, when you fill out that submission form, it's going to go right over to Alex, since Alex is the expert on those OCP copyrights and the OCP catalogs. So before filling out a manual submission, you want to make sure that you're really doing your due diligence and searching the database to make sure that the title isn't already included. So Brenna, I'll ask you to go ahead and drop that really great blog post, how to search for folks in the chat. The best way, the easiest way to get started searching our database is just to go ahead and type your title and your contributor last name right into the search bar. Yes, there are lots of other great bells and whistles and ways to narrow your search and things that can be very, very helpful. But if you start just with that title and contributor right in the search bar, pretend it's, Google or another search engine, start there. The vast majority of the time, that's going to give you 5 or 6 almost perfect matches. And you're going to be able to narrow down whether the piece you're looking for is in the database already. One other thing to keep in mind as you're searching, copyright is song specific, not resource or hymnal specific. So for example, if OCP is the copyright holder of a particular hymn, but you happen to utilize the Augsburg Fortress ELW hymnal, and you find the correct OCP hymn entry in the system, but you don't see the ELW version listed on that entry, that's okay. We want you to focus on that copyright for the individual song because that is an OCP copyright, right? And it's only sort of secondary that it happens to be in your Augsburg Fortress hymnal. So don't stress out if you don't see your hymnal. Make sure what you're noticing is that contributor name and that copyright holder information is matching. That's what's most important. So now if you've done your due diligence, you've searched the database in a few different ways, and you are very, very sure that that title is not included in the One License database, then you can go ahead and fill out a manual submission. So Alex, I know you have a few examples ready to show us of those popular ones that you get. Why don't you give us some tips and tricks for filling out those manual submission forms, and what information can we give you to make you reviewing those submissions really, really easy?
Yeah, well, continuing with the theme of the arrangements, those are pretty. I mean, they're pretty simple to find. They're not too complicated, but I think what's happening is folks are looking for the arranger's name versus the originator of the content. So let me just show you how I would search for that. So if I'm looking for Dan Schuete's "Here I Am Lord," not the arranger, not by the arranger's name, but by the originator of the content. So Dan Schuete. I'm going to type in "Here I Am Lord." And then I like to put in the name of the composer in the search field, because that'll help ensure that the record that you really want will populate more towards the top, so that way you're not having to scroll through different pages and try and find the record. So I just like to put in, you can put in the full name or just the last name. Either way will work just fine. And then you'll see here that there's various records of Dan Schuete's "Here I Am Lord," because there's different versions that exist out there. There's some bilingual records, Spanish, Vietnamese. You could click on any one of these records and it would count as reporting, even though it might not match the version that you're using specifically. But assuming that you're just using the English regular version, then you can just click on this record. Even though it may not be the resource that you're using, you could still click on this checkbox and it would still count as reporting. The OCP resources are listed there for convenience. So if you're using an OCP resource, then you can search by the song or page number of that resource, and then it just populates. It makes it easier to find. So like if you're using Breaking Bread 2023, and then you go up and utilize the hymnal resource search field, you can search for Breaking Bread. And then, what was that number? 395. Then it will populate that record specifically to that resource and the song number. So that's just out of convenience. Again, if you don't see a resource that you're using, you can click on any one of those checkboxes and it'll count as reporting for that record. So since folks tend to look for the arranger's name of this tune, let me show you the back end. So this is the publisher user interface. This is where all of your song submissions go, which then I log in and review all of those submissions. So here is the user interface of what that looks like. You're going to see quite a bit there. That seems like a lot, but it's really not. We can get them by the hundreds if I don't touch this for a week. So I try to stay on top of it and look at them every day, so that way you're not waiting too long to get those submissions. But going on, looking at "Here I Am Lord," we have this submission that was submitted on November 8th. There wasn't a contributor listed here, but I've been doing this for a while now. I know for a fact that it's Dan Schuete. So when I open up that review submission, you'll see the copyright, OCP, the title. We don't have a first line, but that's okay. Copyright year, the type is music. And down here in contributors, you see they put John Carter. Right away, that tells me, okay, this is definitely going to be an arrangement. So John Carter is the arranger of the version that they're trying to report. But because I get these every day, I know that, okay, since it's an arrangement, sticking to that rule of thumb, it's Dan Schuete who is the originator of the content. So when I search for our records in our catalog, I'm going to select the 1981 copyright Dan Schuete. And when I check that box, that replaces that record when I submit it, and then that's what you'll receive. And then that would let you know that, okay, this is the record that you want to report to. And I can actually, I'm gonna go ahead and just hit submit so they receive it. And then that's that. And then I move on to the next one. Another tip I would like to offer as far as searching for Psalms. Psalms are kind of tricky because our records will sometimes include the first line of the Psalm, and sometimes they'll include the Psalm number along with the first line of the Psalm. And if you search with using the Psalm number and the first line, sometimes it won't show up. So another trick that you do is try and search for the record on both ways. So if you type in the Psalm number and then the first line of the Psalm and nothing comes up, try removing the Psalm number and searching it that way, but also include the composer, because that'll help bring the record up to the top. Was there anything else, Katie, that I needed to address regarding searching?
I think that is really, really helpful. The other thing I was going to ask you to talk about a little bit are those titles that maybe have different languages depending on the resource that we're using.
Right.
You know, specifically, I know OCP has some Spanish titles that are in English hymnals.
Right.
And those can sometimes be a little tricky to find in our database. So if you could share some tips, on that, that'd be super.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any folks out there if they use the Evangelical Worship Lutheran Hymnal. We have a handful of OCP songs that are in that hymnal, and that hymnal is not listed as a resource on One License. We have some titles in there that are originally in Spanish, but then have been translated to English in the Lutheran hymnal. So if you're ever looking for a song used out of the Lutheran hymnal, one of the things to look for is the composer. If you look at the composer, say an example would be All Earth is Hopeful, which in parentheses in the hymnal, it's labeled Toda la Tierra. This is translated from Spanish to English. So when you go onto One License and look for that record in English, you're not going to find it because it's originally in Spanish, and that record you have to search for it under the Spanish title Toda la Tierra. I guess a way to a trick to kind of figure out, you know, oh, is this this is a translated, you know, piece of music. And one of the things you look for is to look at the copyright line, and it'll say TR and then a name. Let me show you, let me give you a visual so you can see what that looks like. So I'm going to show you this is a PDF that I made of All Earth is Hopeful, Toda la Tierra. This is the Evangelical Worship Lutheran Hymnal. This is an OCP copyrighted song, originally in Spanish. If you look at the copyright below, can you see that okay? Katie, Brenna, can you see the copyright line? Should I make this a little bit bigger?
It could be a tiny bit bigger, but it's at least readable. Oh, that'll be perfect.
Okay, right, let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, you see here at the very top line, it says text, Alberto Thule, birth is 1932. TR, Madeline Forel Marshall, born 1946. The TR, short for translated, will tell you that's a good clue to tell you, like, okay, this was translated. This is a translated piece of music. Alberto Thule, that's kind of a Spanish sounding name. That's another clue that can tell you, like, oh, okay, so this is, you know, this is probably not originally an English piece of music. Then you've got who it's by. It's music and text by Thule. And so in this case, you would want to search based off of the original language of the tune. So Toda la Tierra. So if I go to One License and type in Toda la Tierra, I'm also going to include the last name because it'll help populate the record to the top. figures, that would happen.
I think if you X out of your Dan Schutte under the Matthew.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yep.
Try
Otherwise,
that again. Okay. All right. Take two. Toda la tierra. And here we have the top record is Toda la Tierra. Again, you're not going to see the Lutheran hymnal listed because that's not one of the resources that's listed. But this would be the record you would use to report if you were going to be using that English translated music and text. And you can check on any one of these boxes and it would report accordingly.
Perfect. I think that is really, really helpful. Thank you for walking us through that, Alex. That helps. So in just a moment, we'll head over to Brenna and see what kinds of questions we're hearing in the chat. But first, Alex, is there anything else you want to be sure to share with our license holders today?
At the moment, no, unless there were any questions, or we can just stick to the submitted questions for now, and then we can take additional questions towards the end.
Perfect. No worries.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Perfect. Well, let's check in with Brenna. It looks like the chat has been pretty active. So what are we seeing over there?
Yeah, I've been talking with my friend Gina. We're having a great time. Well, Gina and I are friends now. She doesn't know that, but I know that. We're having a great time investigating some titles. And I think that this is just a really great example of what we do all the time, and how we go through the thought process of trying to figure out whether something is covered, if it's not covered, if it is covered, but you can't find it, right? Which is a big part of the conversation, because then sometimes things become manual submissions, right? And then Alex has to go through the information for OCP. So it all, really works together. The interesting thing about the system, and this is going to sound like an oversimplification, my friend, so just go with me on it. The system and the data in it is the responsibility of our member publishers to keep updated and active. A printed resource is likely, all of these years later, outdated, even in some little capacity, right? So perhaps the copyright was held by the artist at one time. It's entirely possible that it's been sold to another entity since then, and naturally a printed resource can't be updated, right? So that's what I mean when I say it's an oversimplification, right? It sounds kind of obvious or silly when you think about it that way, but it's entirely possible that the information that we have in our system, there are just going to be little differences between that and what is written in your printed book. So to give everybody an example, there was a song that Gina was trying to find. And the first thing that I did was I searched the drop down for Hymnal 1982, song number 679. That did not pull up any results for me. That's not surprising to me. And I say that just because to have a hymnal index on our service is a very high level member publisher participation. So all of our member publishers add their titles to the system. Some of them add image files. Very few of them are indexing entire hymnals on the service. So the next thing that we want to do is to search by the name. And ironically, that post that I shared earlier on how to search, the author of that post has joined us for Call and Response. Her name is Siobhan McGuire. I won't put her on the spot to say anything, but she wrote a really fantastic article about how to search. And I encourage you all to save that link before we X out of the meeting, so that way you have it. But typing in the title and then the author name, as Alex showed us earlier, is a really great way to make sure that you find exactly what you're looking for, even if the hymnal data is not there to support it. So our service is song specific, not hymnal specific, that Katie shared earlier. So this then led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. It turns out that the copyright for the words and the copyright for the music are held by two different entities, not one specific company. So now we know we need to have a words report and a music report. How many times have we paired Beach Spring or Nettleton or anything else with different words, right? So you have to report words and music separately. And then that took us into a conversation about why there are duplicates potentially in the system. So I suggested to Gina that she's more than welcome to email us, and we can email our colleagues at Hope or any other member publisher to get some more information. Because you're right, sometimes the entries in the catalog look nearly identical, and there's some small difference between them. It's also possible that there's a duplicate in the system, and they're going to appreciate that you alerted them to that, so that way they can reconcile their records. So it's an important conversation, and we answered it. So I won't offer it as a question to you, Katie, but I'll just say it's something that we deal with all the time.
Absolutely. Alex, it looks like you have something to add too.
Yeah, something I just recalled regarding searching. Mass parts are every now and again I'll get a submission for they're searching for a mass part. So there might be minimal information in the song submission, and it'll just be the mass part title. So say they're looking for "Glory to God," and that's it. Glory to God. There'll probably be a copyright date and then the composer. That is a very, very broad way to search for something, especially a mass part, because usually mass parts are going to be included in a mass that's going to have a name. So example would be say Belmont Mass by Christopher Walker. Within that mass, the Belmont Mass, you'll find all of the associated mass parts, Glory to God, depending if it's Latin or English, Glory to God, Lamb of God, all of that. So when you're searching for a mass part, you want to always include the mass part title along with the mass part name. So if I can just, why don't I just show you so you can see it. So, and this is if you're searching manually. There is an option to search by mass part title, but let me just show you the manual way. This is how you're initially looking for a record. So if I were to type in "Glory to God" and nothing else, I am going to get all of these hits. So as you can see, it's a very broad search. A lot of records, pages and pages. So what we want to do is we want to narrow that down. So I'm going to include, assuming that we're looking for the Belmont Mass, that's what I'm going to type in. I'll type in Belmont Mass, Glory to God, and just for kicks, I'm going to put in Walker since we know that information. And then, well, it should be here. There it is. So it didn't populate all the way to the top, but it's on the same page. So Belmont Mass, Glory to God. If this is what you're using to report, this is the record that you would check to report. And you could also search by utilizing the Browse by Mass setting. So if you go into Mass setting, we'll stick with Belmont Mass, which is listed right here. If I click on that, in theory, all of the related records to the Belmont Mass should appear. Fingers crossed that happens. And we'll see here, for the most part, we've got a bunch of Belmont Mass related records. So that is another way that you could narrow down your search rather than having to do all that manual data entry. You can just search by the mass title.
That's really helpful. For our Protestant folks, there's also that other liturgical settings option, which works the same way for non-mass liturgical services. So you can do the same thing Alex just showed, but for some of those other services. So this leads us a little bit into one of the other questions that we hear a lot, and quite a few folks asked when they registered as well. So sometimes pieces are part of a collection, and the individual pieces might have different copyright holders than the main published book. And I know, Alex, you talked, when you and I met beforehand, you talked a little bit about the extra information that folks can give on those manual submissions to help you know that a particular piece is part of one of those collections. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's better that you give me too much information than not enough. Including like, I know some folks in the past in submissions, they've included the copyright line in the comments field. That's great, do that, that is very helpful. The copyright year, the composer and or arranger, if it's an arrangement, if it's music only, or if it's music and text. Give me everything that you possibly can, because it'll help me better determine if it's a record that we can or should have on one license. I know for, in particular for instrumental post and prelude pieces, that one is kind of a tricky one, because one license wasn't originally designed for it. Well, since we started streaming masses because of COVID, more folks they're streaming this music, this instrumental only organ music, and which, we thank you so much for your diligence and hard work and trying to, do the right thing and report. We appreciate that so much and are grateful, that you do that. So thank you for that. Because our database on our end isn't set up to get those types of records onto one license. So we have to do it just kind of as they come to us. So anytime you have a post or prelude instrumental music that you want to stream, the best option would be to just to put in a song submission, and then assuming that it's OCP copyrighted material, then we will certainly do our best to get it onto one license as quickly as possible.
Perfect. I think that's really helpful. I know that OCP, as well as many of our other member publishers, have worked really hard to get those instrumental titles added over the last couple of years now, as we've created that. So I appreciate hearing that you're ready for those and are open to those manual submissions. So yes. Yeah, definitely. The more information that license holders can add on those submission forms, the better. I think that is super. I'm seeing quite a few other questions in the chat, so I will head back over to you, Brenna, and see what we've got.
Yeah, so a couple of quick ones that we can fire through. Stephanie, thank you for your questions. The first one was about explaining what SKU numbers are and how to use them. So our member publishers, when they add data to the system, they have the option to assign a SKU number, or they have the option to have that number generated randomly for them. It's just an ID number in the system. So when you go to the store and you buy bananas and the number is 4040, and then you come to our system, actually it's 4011, I think. Plums are 4040. Anyone else work in a grocery store when you were younger? Yep. So you just never forget those numbers. In our system, the SKU numbers are assigned to our member publishers, right? So sometimes, and it's rare, but if you type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and another publisher has done the same thing, you might get 2 hits on a song ID, right? But the purpose is to make that process easier. Also, if any of you are outsourcing your reporting, I know many a high school music student who needs service hours, and that might be a good project for them. Having you do the legwork of figuring out what song IDs you're using makes it easier for them to report. So that could be an option for you too. Stephanie also asked, we have a Latter-day Saints organist, and he used a piece from the Mormon Tabernacle organ book, got permission from the entity that owns it. She's assuming that all she needs to do is report. That's all she needs to do to report, even though they're not a part of one license. Yeah, so if an entity is not a part of our service, they're going to have their own process for how they handle their licensing. So I encourage you to reach out to them and tell them exactly what you're doing with it. So using it within the context of a worship service, putting it online, having a Zoom service, those are all different things that require different types of licensing. So you're going to want to reach out to them specifically to find out what their terms are on that. Unfortunately, I can't speak to it, but all of our member publishers participate in the different styles of licenses. And then even on a granular level, their songs are approved one way or another for a certain license type. So that's a good thing to know when it comes to our service. Celeste asked, she's using organ music that is over 60 years old. Katie, does she have to report that?
Well, you're going to want to double check for a copyright information. So it does depend on the country that you're in. Typically in the United States, apologies for assuming your location, but if you're in the United States, typically it's 70 years after the death of the copyright holder. But keep in mind, copyright can be renewed or can change hands. So it's always best to look at that copyright information. As an organist myself, there are also various editions of pieces for organ that you might expect to be copyrighted. For example, some Bach pieces that new editors have, changed so that our present day hands can grab those fingerings and things, and they've changed them enough that they have been re-copyrighted. So you're going to want to really pay attention to the version that you're playing from and what that copyright information is on that copy.
Great, thank you, Katie. Two other quick questions that I'll mention, and then I'll pass it back over to you. Joshua, yes, thank you. The ISBN number or any other information, I'm sure Alex or any of our other member publishers would appreciate that. So thanks for more information. And then Sue, asking about live streaming your masses. If we rehearse a song after the mass is over, but it may still be streaming, do I need to log that song in? So I would say do your best to end the live stream of the service when the service ends. Because you're transitioning from a worship service into a rehearsal. So it's, two different headspaces. Better safe than sorry. If it's included in the live stream, I would report it. But remember that you also need to be including all of the copyright and licensing attribution information under the description section of your video. It is incredibly important when you are posting your services online, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or otherwise. It's not just enough to have a one license. It's not just enough to report your usage. YouTube doesn't know that. Facebook doesn't know that. You need to include in the description section of the video all of the copyright and licensing information. You will have a much better time having bots leave you alone if you include that information in the description section of your video. All right. Katie, I think that's the end of the questions that I've received so far, but happy to entertain anything else that you had already had previously submitted.
Perfect. I actually think we have done pretty well. I was just checking the document that Alex and I had with those registration questions. And I think for the most part, we've been able to at least touch on all of those topics. We do have a couple minutes just left in our scheduled time together. Alex, I'll go back over to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to offer for the license holders today?
At the moment, nothing that I can think of, unless my lovely boss Amanda has anything that she wants to add. I know she was just here as a so to speak a fly on the wall, but I am offering her the opportunity if she wants to offer any insight that I may have missed. You are welcome to do that, Amanda, if you'd like.
Alex, you covered everything. I know it can seem complicated to a song is born somewhere and transitions and moves out into many hymnals and worship resources. We love that. That's what we love about music. It can touch so many people. So thank you for your patience as you try and locate the birthplace of that song and report it correctly. So just try to put in as much information as possible and we'll help you with the search. Alex is so diligent.
Yes.
We sit down and look at things together if we're really sleuthing for you. I guess one other comment would be sometimes if we can't quite figure out which song you meant, which Mary Frances Reza Mass part it was because she's written more than one Mass, we can always, quote, reject an option and with comments saying, oh, if you could please resubmit this and tell us which Mass setting or which resources was in or a little bit more information and we'll try again. So that's just an invitation to have you resubmit it with more information and then we'll go back into the sleuthing mode and either locate it on the service already, or if it was missing, if it's a song that just never got there somewhere, we can add it for you. So, but Alex has covered the main things that we see, and that will really help you submit more efficiently and us approve the information more efficiently. So thank you all.
Thank you, Amanda. And just want to add, when in doubt, if you've exhausted all search options that you can think of to your knowledge, it is okay to submit a song submission. That's why we're here. We want to help and try and make this as easy and painless as possible. So don't ever feel bad about, submitting a song submission, because that's why we're here. So we're glad to help.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate that. It's definitely nice to hear as a past license holder, right? To know that you're ready to receive those and to help get those entered or point us in the right direction if it perhaps isn't your title or something like that. Well, let me do one more check with Brenna for any questions in the chat, and then we'll wrap up our time together.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, for jumping in. That was a really lovely overview, I think, and a good way for everyone to learn the perspective of how the member publisher interacts with the system, right? So Amanda giving permission to have a song submission rejected and then they reach back out to us again with more information, right? That shows a really, really high level of partnership. I mentioned earlier in the chat, but GIA and OCP co-own one license, if that wasn't something that you were already aware of. But to Gina's last question, all of our member publishers, again, they participate at different levels, but they also have different capacity levels, right? So you have some member publishers who are reviewing their song submission queues on a weekly basis. So say they only get a couple, they're able to knock them out on Monday morning, and then they check it again the next Monday morning. Some of our member publishers don't have specific representatives or have other capacity issues that cause them to have delays with their submission queues. And this is just me trying to be as transparent with all of you as possible while still being really respectful to all of our member publishers. Everyone's going to participate in the website in a different way. What I will say though, because I don't want to give you a non-answer, is that if you've submitted a title and you haven't heard back from them in maybe, let's say, 2 weeks or so, feel free to send us an email and then we can sort of prompt them or bring their attention to that song submission queue. You never know if somebody's out on leave or if there's been turnover or whatever the situation happens to be. And I'll also mention too that you're more than welcome at any time to reach out to the publisher directly and ask a specific question. You don't have to go through us necessarily. We certainly have their email addresses and we can reach out to them on your behalf, but you certainly don't need to do that. You can reach out to them directly as well. The same thing would go for if you reached out to us with a unique request. We're doing a fundraising CD, or we're doing something that's outside of the scope of what one license is able to cover. Well, no problem. We'll give you the contact information for that publishing house, and then they can speak to you about how you can go about licensing the thing that you're looking to try to do. So I hope that question is helpful, and that answer is helpful too. So thank you all so much for submitting those today. It's been a lot of fun to talk with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, a special thank you to everyone who joined us today or who might be watching the recording in the future. Thank you so much to Brenna and the other One License folks for being present, and especially to Amanda and Alex for joining us today and being so willing to share all of this wonderful information. We appreciate everything that you do so very much. So thank you. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Take care, and we will hopefully see you next month at the next call and response session. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, Katie.
Bye,
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.